Hi and welcome to the Machine Ethics Podcast. This week we're talking to Sam Hill, designer and co-director at Pan Studio. We're talking to him about machine suffering, what is AI, cultural artifacts, smart machines with dumb jobs, games and simulation, AI news this week, and creating a computer narrative immersive theatre production. Thank you for everyone who's contributed on Patreon. You can find the Machine Ethics Podcast at machine-ethics.net, and thanks for listening. Hi Sam, thanks for joining me on the podcast. If you could just quickly introduce yourself and why you're interested in artificial intelligence.
Hello, my name is Sam Hill. I'm one of the co-founders of Pan Studio, and we're a interaction design studio. We do a lot of experiential design, and a lot of our work takes place in the game design space or installation design space. We do a lot of stuff in the public realm, and a lot of that focuses around AI in a sense. We create creatures quite a lot. We make narratives that have interactive things in them that often need to be represented in some way by an AI, and often that AI is very rudimentary and stupid, but it hints at something that's much smarter. A lot of it's kind of future forecasting in a way. So we try and do a lot of trickery in order to communicate that we've got something smarter than it is. But in a thematic sense, we're very interested in the future potential of AI.
So, I think we met recently at the Robots Day in Bristol, the Bristol watershed, and you had your happily kind of experience almost where you're carrying this robot around and you have this kind of real emotional attachment to this kind of apparatus almost with a funny face on it. And it kind of struck me that happily and some of the other stuff you are doing is kind of to do with almost kind of social intervention and emotional reactions. So they might not be the highest technical things, but you can quite quickly imagine how you would kind of do similar things with things which are more technically sophisticated in the future, or those things will have the same issues about emotion and integrating within our social structures and all that sort of and play and navigating that sort of remit.
Yeah, happily especially is an example of a system that was designed to look at the potential future of robotics and AI, and the one element of it was exploring the potential abuse of that power, I suppose, to make something that was smarter than it needed to be, and that had an emotional intelligence that wasn't necessary, and that in that sense created a kind of agony or suffering in the machine that wasn't a consideration for the designers or the creators of the machine, but that existed nonetheless. And that seemed like an interesting idea. It was one of many ideas that we played with on that project, and in many ways we probably tried to stick too many ideas into there and too much future speculation and narrative, because that sat alongside quite a few other ideas about data security and invasion of privacy. But it was something that kind of has had a stickiness to it, and it's resonated and feels relevant to a kind of a group of other projects that we've also worked on in this space about intelligent machines, but also emotional machines, and the way that they've been created and the way that they get used, and their role in servitude as well.
There's a lot going on in, or has been going on in science fiction, but more recently we have things like the remake or the continuation of Westworld, I think it's called, and things like this, which are they're kind of looking at the emotional side of artificial intelligence and how emotions play a part in something that we might create in the future. It's almost really resonant at the moment, that sort of thinking and because we have all these machines, but they don't necessarily have any distinct emotions. So we're kind of projecting ourselves into the future a little bit, I would have thought, with that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. It's something that obviously, you've got the classic films like Blade Runner, and even the original Westworld was made in 1973, I think. So the themes of robotic servitude and ethics from the perspective of the treatment of the machine rather than the creating a machine that treats humans in a certain way. I guess that's been around as long as the term or the concept of robot itself. Because of course, like robot means slave, and it's already a loaded term. But yeah, there does seem to be a resurgence or a heightened interest right now in that side of robot ethics. I don't know what term you use to distinguish the treatment of machines versus the creation of machines that treat humans in a certain way, but it seems very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's a funny term which is computer ethics. So when we first got computers in the workplace and things like that, people literally didn't know how to use them, so they had to be taught about how one should treat the computer, and that's computer ethics. And machine ethics is kind of more like the other side of the coin, and how the algorithms and stuff can almost mistreat us in a way. And you can extend that out to kind of whatever you like, really, like the stock market, backfiring because of these algorithms, or automated cars crashing into each other. So there's that kind of like different side of it, I guess. I really enjoy that kind of picture of someone mistreating a computer, just like computer ethics. But it's things like turning it off at the wrong time and things like that, which is quite amusing. When we first got computers, we didn't really know how to use them. So I always ask people, when they think about artificial intelligence, AI, what do you mean? What are you thinking of when you are talking about artificial intelligence?
Oh God!
Have you got a definition?
So, I suppose. I mean, I'm like very heavily influenced by sci-fi, so I have a very sci-fi view of what artificial intelligence is, I think. So it probably is the kind of the Cylons of Battlestar Galactica, or the Ex Machina type creature that is, to all intents and purposes, indistinguishable to a human, and is sentient, and is has a brain that functions in the same way, but is made from copper and ceramic and rather than brain material, grey matter, synapses. So I think from like a philosophical point of view, that's kind of my definition. I suppose there are grey areas in between. Certainly, there is the kind of there's a more working definition of AI, and I generally think of it as a grey space. But certainly, kind of when pondering about it in a kind of open-ended way, it's certainly interesting to think about it from the perspective of being a human-esque or human-like thing. I think that's the most fun interpretation.
Yeah, so kind of it's almost a Frankenstein's monster type scenario where we've embodied ourselves into this other thing which isn't us, but is kind of shaped like us, and it can be good and bad, I guess. In most of those instances, bad, obviously, but I think there are some depictions of good in there somewhere. I think a lot of the Asimov stuff isn't necessarily bad, just kind of slightly gone wrong. There's Isaac Asimov stories. Ex Machina, if people haven't seen it, it's a film. It's very good, but that has a female robot being mistreated, and she's almost indistinguishable. And there's a lot about the Turing test and things like that in that film, which was last year, the year before.
Last year, I think, 2015. Yeah.
Which was really good. I enjoyed that, to be honest. but I mean, it didn't cover. It's one of those things where they don't talk a lot about the mechanics of things like that.
Mm.
But I think Her. Did you ever watch Her?
Yeah, her was fantastic. I did enjoy her.
Her was good. I think I imagine an AI more like Her, to be honest, which is just kind of more of a disembodied artificial intelligence, more kind of like in keeping with this notion of the cloud, I guess.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I think our current trajectory is on, this kind of cloud computing sort of thing.
Yeah. I think that's fascinating, and that seems to be something that we've been thinking about a lot. Is this future vision of robots? You know, it's very the kind of the Jetsons view, or I say Star Wars. Obviously, we all know that Star Wars occurs in the past, but you know, this vision of these disembodied robots kind of rolling around the place, like bouncing into each other and with their own personalities and doing their own thing, seems very counter now to what we're seeing as the evolving state of AI and robotics, which is this giant, singular, disembodied intelligence, or collection of logic systems, which then, you know, the Internet of Things, and it outputs in different ways, but in a way, it's more like it's a centralized, connected thing that only shows itself in these individual forms when it chooses to, or like in the way that the product designers have chosen to. So it's very interesting, I see, to see that difference emerging between the future predictions and the reality, or what seems now to be more likely the reality, the shifting future.
Yeah, I mean, is there some work that you're looking at the moment which has, you know, is dealing with this projection of robots and AI and the kind of future technology, as well as the Happily project, I guess?
Yeah, I think there are several things that we've looked into which have this kind of theme about it. One of the earliest things we did was back with Hide and Seek years ago, where we had a secret room in La Gaîté Lyrique in Paris, and that was the overarching project idea concept, which came from Hide and Seek, was a sentient building, or a building that had somehow come to life implicitly through technology, and it was curious about the people that were in there. And the particular part of the project that we worked on was the building's brain. So it was this room of lights and sound and mechanical, physical bits, but all disembodied and weird, like some kind of Cronenberg alien or something from Akira. And people would enter this room and manipulate the robot and manipulate its emotions and put it in a different state. And that was very interesting. And then the building, or the intelligence's emotional state, would be broadcast throughout the building, and that would change the way the rooms looked and stuff. It was a really fun, interesting project to work on, and I think it must in some way have informed what we did with Hello Lamppost a few years later, where we brought street objects, street furniture to life and gave them voices and personalities.
Yeah. And
again, in a very simple way, they were just basically there's a couple of versions be live at the moment. They are very simple systems, but they hint at a future where almost to an extent that seems unnecessary, an AI or intelligence has been placed into all of these different street objects. It kind of reminds me of the intelligent toaster there's an episode of Red Dwarf where a sentient toaster is nagging everyone for toast, and there's a kind of a Douglas Adams-y idea of these overly smart machines with dumb jobs, and maybe that's something that Hello Lamppost also hints at. And it's like, why does it need to be this smart? But there it is, and you can converse with it and learn about it. And I think Happily is the most recent project along this strand. So Happily was designed to be a project where a fictional organization had created a robot that was able to scan emotions from the people nearby, and then not just broadcast them or protect them, but actually experience them in real time. And it was supposed to be a kind of a social diagnostic device, something that would reveal the state of the area, like what is the emotional state of this particular place. Yeah. But what it ends up being is this terrified machine on the brink of losing control, because it is constantly and with like compulsively exhibiting thousands of emotions every second, and it's tearing it apart. And there just seemed to be something perverse and very compelling and scary about creating something that was smart enough to have emotions, but being subjected to them and not being able to control them. And it's not like an easy analogy, but someone who has an autistic family member compared it to a kind of hyper state of autism where there is stuff happening to it, but the machine, but it's not able to reconcile them or control or make sense of it. And that seemed interesting as a line of inquiry, is to think about, is it what happens when you have the power to create something like that, and you don't respect that power, and you create something that is suffering and tortured as a consequence.
Yeah, I mean, I think these kind of cultural activities are almost poised in the right place to interrogate those sorts of questions. And I think that's really interesting what you're saying about kind of embodying these emotions, because you've done it in a quite a straightforward kind of game-like way, but you could imagine for sure just that happening to something we create, and that actually being, something actually witnessing emotions and being overloaded by it. So it's almost, before we get there, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to integrate these interesting questions that arise from these things? Do we need a lamppost that talks to us? Do we, how are we going to feel about these things when they do exist? Do we need to make them at all? Like, there's loads of these kind of questions. So, yeah, I think film and theatre and art and games and all these sorts of things can really have their place to and their voice in this conversation, for sure.
Yeah, I think gaming especially is a really interesting example, because a huge part of gaming is about simulation, and it must be the one of the biggest applications of AI altogether is creating these bots and creatures that the user interacts with, often in a very violent way. And it kind of reminds me of that story that was hovering around a couple of years ago about someone left a Quake 3 arena server running.
I'm glad it wasn't just me who read that. That's a good one, yeah.
Which is interesting. Someone left a Quake 3 server running with bots playing against each other, allegedly, and found it again several years later, entered the game, and the robots had stopped killing each other, and they just stopped in their tracks. And when the player entered the room, the bots watched him and followed him around, but didn't shoot him until, out of curiosity, he shot one of them, and then the robots all killed him instantly, and the game crashed. And I don't know how valid or true the story is, but it seems like a good, interesting parable about these, I don't know, something about robotic hedonism, or you have these machines that have found a kind of tranquility, and then it's been interrupted, and but there's just the fact that they were created to kill each other, and of course these are dumb things, and the whole program was so small that there's no way that there was any real intelligence gleamed from them. But
yeah, I think they reached a stalemate, didn't they? So they were kind of like stood still, because that was the only way they weren't going to die. basically, because they didn't want to die, but they did want to shoot people, they couldn't really reconcile that fact, so they're just like not doing anything. I heard a similar thing about Civilization 4, maybe something like that. So Civilization's a world building simulation, and someone played that for a long time, and it turned into this dark kind of 1984 scenario where
Oh God, yeah, I remember this. Yeah,
where all these continents, so all these different players were evenly matched, and it was just kind of like a stalemate of nuclear war to and fro for hundreds of years, basically. And there's this one human player versus maybe a few computer players, and they were very evenly matched, and it just descended. And there was quite a lot of fan fiction based on it, actually, as well.
Yeah,
which I enjoyed from a Reddit feed. I mean, I think wholly that because most of the stuff they are essentially simulations. I mean, these AI, the computer programs that we're creating, so they do lend themselves to being used in games. And things which are kind of not really games, or like almost games as well. Which is interesting, and things like obviously AlphaGo and chess and beating human players at their own games essentially as well. Did you see? I mean, have you got anything else on the game side of things? I guess.
Yeah, there was a good Guardian article yesterday or the day before, I think, came out about AI in gaming, which I thought was interesting. But it reminded me of, I think they talked briefly about GTA. Which is interesting because in GTA, obviously, once a character in the game disappears off the travels farther enough away from the player, it disappears and ceases to exist.
Yeah.
There was a wonderful game that I played years ago called Hard War, and it was set in a crater, but it was very similar to GTA otherwise. And every bot, every entity in the game had a job, and there was a whole like self-sufficient ecosystem taking place where they were traveling around. They were like, bots that were miners, and bots that were traders, and bots that were pirates, and they were they had an autonomy, and they were going about their life. And you got dropped into this world, and you could, when you shot a trader and stole all of their stuff, it felt a lot more real somehow. There was more guilt in there than just running over a handful of randomly created people in GTA, and I thought that seemed very fascinating to me. But it does strike me that the main demand to have more realistic, better AI does seem to be in gaming, and I think that's very interesting. That play and entertainment, recreation seem to be such big potential areas for AI development.
Yeah, I mean, and they've kind of always been in games essentially, simplistically and then more progressively. And there's the game of life, which is not really a game as well. There's the game of life, which is a automation of this kind of organic thing, which looks like something organic but based on very simple rules. So doesn't necessarily have to be complicated to be sophisticated, I guess, as well, in some of the simulations. Did you hear about the automated cars being trialled in Milton Keynes this week?
No, I didn't hear about this.
So the government had put some money into research in automated cars with several organisations. I can't remember their names offhand. We had Nick on here on the first episode we did, and he was participating in some of these trials, and he's finally made some kind of headlines, I guess. They were doing some tests in Milton Keynes this week. So it was Nick Reed from TLR, but there was some universities involved, and obviously Milton Keynes and other places. And yeah, it was kind of very very calm. It was kind of like, look, we've made something, and it's fine, sort of thing. They were moving slowly through the city, and everything seemed to work fine. I didn't think none of the videos I saw were actually on open roads. I don't think
Right.
necessarily, and I mean, there's just continuously stuff on automated cars in the media, but I think that together with the UK starting to have a kind of a stance on this in the law and stuff as well, it's kind of interesting. That and also there was an item in Wired this week talking to Obama about how he feels about kind of artificial intelligence and technology. Which is quite good. You should check out wired.com. President Obama on how we'll embrace self-driving cars. And
So he was pro driverless cars.
Yeah, he was into it. Yeah, for sure. I think there's a longer piece and there's like a short video about it, but I haven't read the longer piece yet. But I think he is aware of the pitfalls of it, but I think he's generally positive about the whole situation. And I think most of the people we've had on this podcast have been genuinely positive. So do you want to be negative just to...
Oh, no, I don't. No,
Okay.
I don't want to be the sore thumb.
No.
I don't know. What can I say that's negative about them?
You hate the idea. You wish that they burn in hell or something.
No, I think they're good. I'm not sure about if they'll reduce traffic. That seems to be a contentious point. Whether or not there'll be less cars on the road when there are these cars exist, and who is the owner of these cars as well. Who owns the technology? Who owns the power behind this new transport system? But I think, other than some soft cynicism, I'm quite interested. I can't actually drive, to be honest. I haven't.
Oh, well.
I don't have a driver's license.
You're fine then. You get taxied around already. So
great. Life in London means I just haven't bothered to learn, much to the shame of my grandparents. But yeah, I'm all for it. Let's get. I'll have a driverless car, definitely.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
We'll get on that then straight away. Is there more stuff that you would like to do in your work with Pan or outside of the studio to do with maybe trialing artificial intelligence or working more projects like the hide and seek project, kind of interrogating artificial intelligence, or kind of letting people experience it almost?
Yeah, definitely. One particular area that's been of interest to us for a while, and we've tried some a little bit of R&D in this area and explored it in a couple of ways, is in robot generated narrative or machine generated narrative, but with physical elements to it. So I'm very interested in the ways that machine storytelling can integrate with real life actors and immersive theater scenarios, and to tell stories that make people feel like they have an agency within a time and space, and they can create pervasive universes around them where there is a plot that unfolds and they have a real effect on what happens, and it seems the only way that would ever be possible is through some kind of machine controlled agents, a kind of machine director, puppet master type thing that could quickly respond to inputs and criteria and use that to create manage drama and narrative generation, the movement of storylines, character development, that kind of thing. But use the real world elements, use human beings, create something that feels much more real, more tangible than anything you could get on through a VR system or through a screen. So I think that's interesting. That's definitely something I'd like to do more in. It's ridiculously ambitious. I don't think we're anywhere near having the technology, but it's a fun area to play with, and it creates interesting challenges like how do humans and machines convey information with the minimal required effort, or in ways that stop blocking them from achieving other tasks. So how do you tell an actor in the subtlest way how to perform in a scene with minimal direction and in a way that isn't so invasive as to break the fourth wall? That seems very, very interesting to me. So yeah, I think there's still a lot that we want to do in this area, and that probably gets more into a more sincere side of AI. I think generally we talk about the idea of it without deploying it in a very serious way. This would actually be, requiring some actual quite sophisticated, smart, responsive systems, and some decent logic, and an understanding of what drama is, what narrative is, how do you tell a good story? So yeah.
Wow, get on that.
That's probably something for 10 years. In 10 years' time, that's what I'd like to do.
Yeah, I mean, if you, I mean, I wouldn't say 10 years. I would say maybe someone listening to this would give you a pot of money, and a year. That'll be fun.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that sounds like a fantastic show for sure. Do you think, as a show, it would say something about the technology itself, or would the narrative, or would it be more narrative focused, more of experience than kind of looking reflectively at the technology itself?
That's a good question. I think, I suppose generally we try to we do deploy quite a lot of nascent tech at Pan, or like semi-available tech. But we try not to let it become too much, the heart of the project. We do try to first and foremost create an excellent experience. And sometimes that doesn't require any tech at all. You can just do that with human beings. But yeah, I think there's something nice. There's something quite circular and neat and elegant about telling a story about a system and using the system at the same time. So unless it gets too navel gazing-y, yeah, I think that would be nice. It would be nice to do something like that.
Yeah. So, in all the things that you've seen in the media, or just things that you're thinking about at the moment, what is the thing that most excites you about AI, algorithms, technology, that sort of thing?
That's a good question. It's a little bit old news, but I still love swarm robotics. I think it's maybe like we're a couple of years past peak swarm robotics. I don't know, but just
it
something
may
about
come around again.
Yeah, I hope when it comes around again, I'll be ready. I love seeing quadricopters flying in formation, and the terrifying whirring noises that they make, or I don't know, the Boston Dynamics dogs being kicked around and mistreated. That seems like another, kind of like news thing. But yeah, God, I don't know. What is? I suppose the potential for immersive gaming definitely is good. That's I think there's exciting stuff there. Every time you see a swarm of zombies or a crowd of soldiers, or large amounts of simulated systems working in a way that just seems so real that it's haunting. I like that. I think that's interesting. I think that's a good backdrop for doing gaming. Something magical happens when you see lots of things working in unison or working at the same time. I think that's when you see that kind of level of chaos, I think that's when technology is kind of at its best, when you see not necessarily complicated systems, but just a scale happening. I think from an experiential perspective, that's quite interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Just thinking if I had anything to add to that. Nothing strikes me, comes to mind.
Or of course, Elon Musk talking about us all being inside a simulation as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's a fabulous argument, because there's no way of testing it, really.
Yeah.
And and if we are or not, it doesn't make a difference to our being. So is almost a non-point.
Yeah.
Great. Maybe we are. Maybe we're not. It doesn't make a difference. Great. So don't spend any money on that.
No.
Do you have anything that scares you in the future? Is there anything that is worrying, you think, with this sort of technology?
I think I'm an optimist when it comes to AI. I mean, I guess we'll have to wait and see. I don't feel like that we're. A lot of people have, predicted that we're on this dangerous route, including people like Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking. Saying that we have to be very careful about how we program our AIs. The singularity, the kind of compounding intelligence. And I think it's important. You have to make sure you put the right values in both senses. You have to make sure you put in the right qualities into the machine that you want to spin out of control and do its thing. But I don't know what scares me. I suppose it's just that access to power. Technology generally is a very powerful tool, and who gets to wield it. Increasingly as individuals, we all become more powerful, and that's something that's interesting for society to deal with. We all have the individual capacity to do a lot of good, but also a lot of harm. But also, who gets to own these systems? Who gets to own our electric cars? Who gets to own our power supply grids? Who gets to own our data and our access to it? I guess that's the kind of scary areas. Is that abuse? We're not very good as human beings at distributing things fairly, are we? So I don't think new power is necessarily going to be one of those things that we distribute very fairly either. Emergent tech, emergent powers. So.
Yeah, I mean, we could definitely be better at sharing for sure.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else you would like to add, Sam?
I'm not sure. No, I don't think so.
Cool. Okay. Wraps. Where can people find you, find out about you?
People can. If you want to find out more about Pan Studio, you can find us on Twitter. We're PAN and for Neptune _studio, or we have a website. We're doing a version of Hello Lamppost where you can talk to bins, benches, shipping containers, anything with a serial number on it in Stratford at the Olympic Park, starting very soon. So if anyone's in northeast London, they can check that out. We have an app that we launched about a month and a half ago in the UK called Run an Empire, which is a strategy running game. So it's a bit like a civilization type strategy game for controlling the most territory, but it's all based in the real world, and you play it as a runner. You go running around the real world to capture territory.
So it's kind of part exercise, part game, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's like a hybrid of a fitness tracker and a strategy territory control game. So that's on the App Store, and that should be coming to Android in the next 6 to 8 months, hopefully, and launching internationally. That's and I'm on Twitter, Sam Hill Design. Although I have to say I don't use it as much as I used to.
That's fine. We'll get you using it again.
Yeah.
We'll just tweet you until you start using it. Tweet
exactly. Yeah. I'll reply to questions.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you very much for coming on the podcast, Sam. Thanks for sharing your insights and experience, and we'll look out for your new AI written show coming in the next couple of years, okay?
Brilliant. Yeah. Thank you. Cheers, Ben.
Awesome.
Thanks very much for having me.